So what I'm going to do first is ask each of our wonderful panellists to introduce themselves and just answer the following questions. So, what are the specific mental health and wellbeing issues facing Gen Z as they enter the world of work? Liz, I'll go to you first.
Hi everybody. I start with an introduction.
Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Dr. Liz. I'm a psychologist and psychotherapist by profession. I spend a lot of time, I would say, bridging gaps, basically, in three main areas. Number one, I work in clinic. I've got a clinic not too far from here in Harley Street, where I work with, as a therapist, with a range of presentations from anxiety, depression, quite a lot of trauma and more dangerous behaviours. I also work in companies where I run workshops, training, consultation, bridging gaps of things to do with different generations, such as what we're going to talk about today, gaps in resilience, which I think we'll also probably touch on today, gaps in brain types, neurodiversity, potential, all different sorts of things. And the third and final way that I work in bridging gaps, so to speak, is in executive coaching, where I help people, I suppose, bridge the gap of potential. I work mostly with leaders and help them go from really great leaders to even more great leaders, and I really enjoy it. The question around Gen Z, mental health, presentation in the workplace today, I mean, we could spend all day talking about this topic, particularly for me being a therapist and specialising in adolescents all the way up to their parents and grandparents and beyond. It's a massive topic. I think if I'm going to pinpoint one area that I would bring up, it would be something around resilience. We're seeing a massive resilience crisis at the moment. I do think that there is a generational link and also a link to technology, the development of things like social media, gaming, even things like, which, by the way, I couldn't live without, Amazon, Deliveroo, all of these sorts of things. What they do is they make things happen quick, now, and it's all about me. And what we're not used to anymore is having to wait, having to be uncomfortable, having to find the grit to get through difficult and hard situations, because we're so used to instant gratification. We can scroll through social media and have hormones released in our brains with only moving a finger that are the same as if we were gambling in a casino or doing drugs. It is addictive, it is a quick fix, and it's minimal effort. So to be able to sit and concentrate and even learn how to write with a pen or put in revision for exams, let alone come to work and meet deadlines, clear our emails on time with no one telling you, well done, here's a clap, here's a medal, it's really hard because it requires long-term investment for long-term reward, and that's not something we're training our young people up to do. And I think that resilience crisis is at the heart of a lot of conversations around mental health and well-being in the workplace.
Fabulous, thanks Liz. And Mel.
Hello everybody, I'm Melissa Emmanuel. I am the Global Director of People Operations and Reward at Tom Ford Fashion. To answer your question, I think there are several things, right, and we've spoken about it at length. But I think the main thing I'm seeing in terms of is a mismatch with their expectations and the reality of work. So we live in a very woke society, which I'm happy for. Lots of podcasts, TikTok reels and all sorts of things telling people what they should be experiencing and how people should be at work and how they should be praised and rewarded and how your salary should be this and you should be doing this. But then when they get into the workplace, they're realizing that it's not as woke as they perhaps think it is. And therefore that leads to them being demotivated and just a general mismatch of expectations versus reality. And getting line managers and leaders to come on board with understanding this, not looking at things or not looking at Gen Z, through the, oops.
Use this, please.
Okay. Oh, I guess I'm doing a solo. I guess I'll be Beyonce today.
Yes, please.
Not looking at Gen Z through the guise of their own experiences and their own generational norms and types is a challenge. So I think it's a mismatch on both sides, but I think they're really struggling with facing the realities of work with their own preconceived ideas.
And Lewis, what about your experience? I think you'll be able to do it through your mic.
Close enough?
one solo.
Lovely.
There we go. There's only one Beyonce on stage.
I don't know anyone else who was in Destiny's Child. Was it Destiny's Child?
Yes, it was.
Yes. So I'm Rooke, Reward Manager at Gymshark. So this challenge actually, I suppose, it kind of works the opposite way for us. So our average age is about 30, has been for a while. Our Gen Z population is actually quite big. I think one of the challenges outside of kind of the mental well-being space and the expectations that you already mentioned, Mel, is around financial well-being. So I think the kind of macroeconomic landscape that we're in at the moment, the last 10 or so years with Brexit, COVID, everything else that's happened since then, cost of living crisis, the position that the younger generation are in coming into work, and what they want to get from work is very different from what it used to be. So, however many years ago, when pension was, kind of the be-all and end-all of financial well-being, you get your salary, you get your pension, just kind of doesn't cut it anymore for the younger generation, and actually their main priorities are very different. It's about how do I save for a house? Is that actually a reality anymore? And those challenges for them from a financial perspective are very different. So in terms of how we then, kind of from a reward lens, accommodate those and making sure that we've got flexibility in our benefits offering and in our support for the younger generation is much more critical now than it has been.
Yeah. We've already touched on resilience, so I'm really keen to launch a poll with our audience. If you could just scan the QR code, and don't forget you can ask questions using the Slido app to our lovely panellists. So if we could launch our first poll, which hopefully that's done it now. So would you describe your younger employees, i.e. Gen Z, as resilient in the workplace? Oh, it's not looking great so far. We've got quite a lot of no's. Liz, while this comes through, why does resilience come up so much in a conversation about Gen Z?
It's so interesting. I think on the back of some of the things that I said earlier, I actually made a quick list of the main ways that, for me, in all the industries that I work in, I'm seeing why Gen Z are kind of shaking things up. And resilience lies at the heart of a lot of it. And I rarely write things down, actually. This is full of scribbles that no one will ever understand. But I just scribbled them down so I don't forget any. And I think that there are a few things. At the core of this, I think there is a misunderstanding. I think Gen Z are very outspoken. That's not the misunderstanding. I think we're probably clear on that. They're very good at saying what they think, online in particular, shall we say. Answering the phone and saying it there or face-to-face meeting is questionable. But they can be quite outspoken in their own way. I think that can lead us to sometimes mislabel that, to misunderstand where that's coming from, because at the same time they're really into this whole growth mindset thing, which we all, I'm sure, are on the same pages nowadays, that we're all about learning and communicating and growing from each other. And I think what we're not doing is matching the outspokenness with rationale, with communication, with clear reasoning of what is going on at work. So, for example, I work in I'd say the biggest topic that's coming up across all the industries that I work in, from public services to law, to hedge funds, to everywhere, to fashion, is the conversation about getting to the office, being in the office, getting there on time, showing up face to face, how they're working, how often, when, what's the point, why should I come anyway? And that is a massive area of contention. The younger generations are really quite outspoken about that in particular. But I think that what I'm finding across a lot of senior leadership in the organisations is a lack of vocabulary to actually match the outspokenness with rationale of why you do need to be in the office, beyond saying, well, that's not how it was in my day, or it's just better that you're here, to actually pinpoint things like, well, how are you going to learn to pick up non-verbal behaviour, to have face-to-face interactions, to have difficult conversations, receive constructive feedback, to speak in public? How will you learn those things in your room at home behind a screen? And we're finding a fear in matching the outspokenness. And I'm a very big believer, for me, my training for leaders is in empowering them to give them a really sensible, really rational, not emotive logic as to why we do what we do, why that is helpful at work, and ultimately get stuff done on time and in budget, which is the point of work. That's why we're all there. So the resilience can come down to they don't want to do it and they all speak about that. But I think we have a real question of, are we matching that? Are we speaking back to that? And my list, and I won't go through them, will be things like outspoken around values, their value system, neurodiversity, wants, needs, understanding of themselves, holding accountability, being authentic. Actually, they do want to earn money. There's a misconception around that as well. It's not just all about taking leave and holiday. They look at millennials and think, I don't want to be in that much debt with no house. I want to earn some money too. The list goes on and on and on. I won't keep going though because I'll just talk for too long.
So we're seeing from the poll here, it's quite split. 49% say younger employees have a little resilience and 45% say no.
But only 6 say yes.
But only 6% say yes, which says it all.
Yeah.
However, I've got to back up. I've got to defend the Gen Zs a little bit as well. I feel like they're getting a little bit of a bashing, and we've also got to look at what they introduce to the workforce and how they can improve well-being, perhaps. Mel, what does Gen Z bring to the workforce?
Quite a bit, actually. Someone like me who is autistic, it's taken me quite a while to be able to have the language to explain those things in the workplace setting. I'm finding that Gen Z are coming in from the gate with that information and are wanting to know what we have from an inclusivity perspective to incorporate and to manage their neurodiverse selves. I'm finding Gen Z having real solid boundaries about things like inclusion. You know, I did an interview last week and someone said to me, you know, what's your inclusivity strategy? And can I see some data to back it up, whether it's actually effective? Wow. Like, I was like, whoa, but okay, go girl. That's great. But so that kind of clear boundaries, clear communication, expectations, whether people call it the woke era or not, I'm finding it thrilling. It's really difficult to get leadership to understand it in a real way and to welcome the challenge and start to act accordingly. But I think that table shaking is so necessary because otherwise, as we all know, until someone really shakes the table, until someone really holds us to account, we're unlikely to change. So, yeah, I think that those clear boundaries, that wokeness, that wanting flexibility, being very open and honest about that is really, really important in this juncture in this generation, I guess. So, yeah, I think that's what they're bringing to the table.
And Lewis, you said yourself that Gymshark has been built and grown through younger workers. So clearly they're doing something right.
Yeah.
But what's the culture like there now? What's the employee experience and what challenges have you had perhaps because you're a traditionally younger workforce?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So our founder and CEO is, I think, 31 now. And he started the business 12 years ago. So he was at uni and has built the business kind of around him. And so our average age has actually tended to track whatever age he is. And I think there was a lot of kind of prior to my time joining, from what I understand, there was a lot of that kind of tribal behaviour of, you know, the younger. Mainly lads, I suppose, behaviour, and actually what the business needed, it grew so quickly, what the business needed was some more maturity, and it needed people with more experience of you know, how does the real world work, and it was very successful, and you know, there's some fantastic people that built the business, and you know, innovation comes from people doing things differently, and the business was built quite a lot around the use of social media, so whilst it can be detrimental to people's well-being, from a business perspective at Gymshark, it was actually very successful in terms of how the brand was built and using influencers, and that being a thing now that wasn't so much before. I think actually, you know, the way that people think about things and not just doing things because it always has been. You know, well, this is the way that you come and you go, well, this is the way we do things, so come in and do that. People are actually, you know, as you said, Malcolm, people are more outspoken, and they're quite happy to say, well, I don't want to do it like that, and they're quite happy to say why they don't want to do it like that, and actually that's where the innovation comes from, is going, not just saying, yeah, I'll do it for the sake of it. So, and I also think because they are more open, more aware, more understanding of mental health challenges, of neurodiversity, I suppose they push businesses and employers to have more support and to have more education around those topics, so that actually you get people coming in and asking questions in interviews of what's your inclusivity strategy, which is a great thing for everyone, not just for Gen Z, right? Because actually it's about flexibility, it's about having options, it's about having support for everyone, whoever they are, not just age, but whatever characteristics and however they bring themselves to work. They push businesses more so to have those structures and those things in place, to make sure that everyone feels included.
Yeah. Now we have our second poll, and this one isn't actually a poll, it's a word cloud. I thought I'd trial out how well this works. So the next question, if it's going to magically appear on our screens, how have you changed your reward and benefit strategy to appeal to younger workers? So if you could just put in what things you've changed or developed, and then, I'm not sure, here we go, they're popping up. So we've got more flexibility, customization, spelled the American way, choice, inclusive. Okay, flexibility is coming out a lot then. Mel, does this sort of chime with your experience of working with Gen Z and their needs when it comes to the reward and benefits?
Yeah, I would definitely say flexibility is a big thing, as well as things being digital. So no one wants to be filling out forms like for a medical cover or anything like that. It's ridiculous. Everything needs to be quite quick, quite accessible, very clear and very flexible. So putting everybody, I think we're going to go into this a bit later, but putting everybody into one sort of pot and saying, okay, all Gen Z need this, and all millennials need this, and all boomers need this, it's not really a thing, because everybody has quite specific personal requirements in terms of benefits and stuff like that. So that flexibility in terms of options, and not putting everything into one thing, or just dealing with whatever the leadership want and rolling it out, I'm finding quite useful and quite engaging, actually. So it's more about options as opposed to pre-prescribed things rather. So I think that's quite, I'm just looking at the different things.
I know, we're all watching it. It's really fascinating to come through. So thank you everyone for contributing. Some other big ones. So we've got another big one, no change. Lewis, how do you feel about that? Do you think you should change your reward and benefit strategy to appeal to younger workers, or should they want to work at your organisation anyway?
I'd hope they would.
Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely. I think you need to be flexible. You need to be able to adapt, and I think that actually is better for everyone. It's not just, you're not creating flexibility just for Gen Z or just for younger workers. You're creating flexibility for everyone, because everyone's situation is kind of different, and unique, right? So the things that you need for them are different. But I suppose probably one of the bigger things for us, which I would say we haven't necessarily mastered, but is a priority, is around communication and actually communicating to people. So it's all well and good having flexibility and choice, but if you don't communicate that effectively, if you don't tell people about it, if you don't explain to people why things are important to them. So people might, Gen Z might come in and go, well, all I want is a house, pension's not important to me. And actually what they'll find is in 30 years, it is important to them, but it might be a bit too late. So giving people education, not just around financial well-being, but just generally, education, communication, and engaging with them and with everyone, really kind of should absolutely inform your benefit strategy.
Yeah, and you both mentioned that these elements, they benefit everyone, not just the younger workers. How useful is it really for us to be cutting up workers into different generations? We're all individual, we all have likes and dislikes. Is it that helpful, or is there a better way for us to reward and understand our employees?
I find it useful as a data point, but I'm always quite wary of companies that base their whole reward strategies on generational factors, because not everybody exists in the monolith, So, for instance, I'm what they call a geriatric millennial. Exactly. So, like avocado toast, but we'll work till 12 midnight if something needs to get done. So all of the stereotypes don't necessarily apply to me. And I think many people kind of are in between generations, or just are different. Our life experiences make us different. So Yeah, I'm always quite wary of people that have those sort of hard and fast rules. I think treating people as individuals and actually taking the time to engage with employees and understanding, either through surveying or whatever the case may be, understanding what the requirements are. Even in different industries, requirements can be very different. So I'm in the creative industry now. The requirements are vastly different to when I was in financial services, for instance. It's almost a different side of the brain in terms of the people I'm working with now. So yeah, it's a case of sort of going back to basics and surveying, understanding, taking the time to understand the workforce and really putting something that is adding value, but then giving them the clarity, the choice and the transparency along with that. So yeah.
And Liz, during your day job, how helpful is it to use those generational labels?
I think that all labels, not just generational ones, we could have the same conversation with, let's say, neurodiversity or any other label, are all helpful to a point. They have a certain amount of value. Normally it comes down to a couple of main things, which is that it can provide access to support. So understanding a person's label, whether it's their generation or their diagnosis of any other things, it means that or any other spectrums of humanity, really. Labels can be helpful to access certain types of support, can help other people understand us. The second thing is it can really give a massive comfort in understanding ourselves. Oh, there's not something wrong with me, I'm just this. So that can be helpful. But of course, they come with limitations, which is that if we started to judge everybody by one person that we know who is one particular label, that's really unhelpful. They're fundamentally limited in that way. But I don't think that we can ignore the fact that there is a generational shift. Our brains work in categories at the end of the day. I think that's why we see so much prejudice across the world, is we're inclined to look at people in terms of categories and to judge. And our challenge is to utilise the labels to the point that they're helpful and let go of the stigmas to the point that they're not.
Brilliant, thank you. And I'm just looking at some questions that have come through, so if you do have any questions, please pop them on the Slido app. Lewis, I'm going to put this one to you, no pressure. So do we think work needs to change to meet the expectations of Gen Z, or Gen Z needs to adapt to the realities of work?
Very good question, whoever asked it. Question. I think it's a bit of both, to be honest, and I think this is where I think EVP comes in, and actually the expectations of what you get as an employee to go and work for a business and what you get back. And I think that kind of shows up in what Liz was saying earlier in terms of the importance of going into the office. And actually explaining why going into the office is really important for people, about building meaningful relationships and connections with people, about being able to collaborate effectively. But actually there's a responsibility on the employer to make sure that that space is effective and it's right for people, because it's so damaging when it's done wrong and it's so great when it's done well. So the expectations are very different, which we've already mentioned. If you want to come in, you want it to be worth coming in for. You want the food to be good, you want the space to be good, you want everything to be, all of the facilities to meet your needs. I'm very focused on food, sorry. Yeah, I love food.
We just had lunch, it's fine.
But that space needs to work. It needs to be a collaborative environment, and it can't just be that you come in, you sit in a room all day, or you sit with your headphones on all day, because actually what is the benefit? You could have just done that from home. So it needs to be a bit of give and take. There is definitely some adapting that Gen Zs need to do to understand actually you do have to come in and work. There are expectations on you. You do need to deliver this, but actually they need to get something back at the same time.
And Liz, do we risk over-rewarding?
Yeah, actually, as I'm sitting here listening, something that just keeps coming up for me is all the way back to the person that you interviewed last week, and the idea of being disruptive and shaking things up and asking questions and saying, I want to know what your strategy is and I want to know if it's effective. For me, my question would be, what do you have to offer to our process? It's not really about, is what you've got already effective? It's more about, I wonder what you do here, and are you open for me being involved to help it grow? And I think that's the disconnect, is we're because of this fear around resilience, and maybe perhaps even the precious nature of sometimes people that we're working with, and I'm not going to just exclude that to particular generations. I think across the board it can make us it can disempower us in our positions. And the real question for me when we're recruiting somebody will be not, first of all, not are you interviewing me, which is a growing trend, but not just am I testing your technical skill set, because we can do that really quickly online nowadays. As you said, no one wants to sit and take long about that. There are loads of people who meet every threshold of academic performance. The questions really are, what are your values? Do you have a growth mindset? Do you know how to collaborate? Now, we have to understand that the continuum of maturity, people start very dependent. They then become super independent. Anyone that knows a teenager or has a teenager will know they're probably allergic to you if you're their parent or, any other position of authority, because they are drastically independent now and you know nothing, absolutely nothing. And then slowly we start to see an interdependence where, you do you, I'll do me, and we can coexist together. And we have to understand that doesn't start to happen until like mid to late 20s. So when Gen Z are coming into work, it's really quite normal that they're rocking up with this, well, I know this and I know that, and this is how the world works, and what are you doing about it? And our job is really to teach them. It's really good to hear you're passionate about that. What have you got to offer? What have you done in this field that you can bring to this organisation? Now, that's not an easy thing for organisations to do, because the moment someone comes up with that kind of attitude, we feel a little resistant, because we're like, whoa, it can be easily misunderstood as entitled. I'm not saying that that's the way that it's intended. And so we're like, either we get into the category of, oh yeah, embrace change, or I really don't want you here because you're different and it's not like that my day. And I think it's more complicated than that. I think we need to find the courage to say, okay, really, let's find the interest. And then we need to help it grow and nurture it. And I think that if we're just using rewards kind of as a carrot-stick situation to just incentivize people and give them prizes for doing stuff at work, we're going to lose. I do think that, because there's so much stuff out there that's always going to be bigger and better and more exciting, especially with social media, because that's the fallacy of social media. And I think that what is more meaningful reward for an individual is if we can learn how to release those hormones in their brains, which really ultimately come from authentic connection, feeling belonging, feeling good about yourself. So if we can empower leaders to train people to make a young person feel seen, feel rewarded through their words, through their language. It is cheaper as well, by the way. But that is more long-standing, meaningful reward for me, as opposed to more counterfeit reward, shall we say? Not that there isn't a place for that, because we all love, the nice treats here and there. But a pool table or like an office dog is not going to keep someone at work without the rest of it. And there'll be people that will work in really rubbish environments if they have a team that they believe in and they feel connected to.
Absolutely. And should we expect, there's a lot of conversation around responsibility and the role of employers and how responsible they should be. Should we expect schools or universities to do more to make young people ready for work? Or is it the employer's responsibility once they become employed? Mel?
I think it's definitely... The word responsibility is problematic for me. I think there are several people involved in building an individual's resilience. So I don't think it's anyone's responsibility per se. So even I was having a conversation at lunchtime with someone, and I was saying with my daughters, they're used to being praised for everything at school. So, they could go into sports day and, come in third. And it's like, oh, yeah, well done for taking part. And this might be a bad thing, but I'm the mum that says, okay, you're going to lose sometimes. Where everyone takes part, but you are going to lose sometimes. You're not going to always win, So let's do a quick retro. Yeah, I do retros with my own children. It's really scary. Let's do a quick retro. What we could do, how we can prepare for next time, and let's turn that around. And I think that way of thinking builds resilience from a parental point of view. But there are several different ways that resilience needs to be built, and it's not just. And I really reject even the thought that it's the employer's responsibility, because we're not their parents. We're really not. And people have to go through stuff to build resilience. And, so it's about obviously having the mechanisms in place and clear and flexible benefits that people can opt into and whatever the case may be. But we cannot go through life for people. People need to actually experience things, because that's what builds resilience. So yeah, I'm not sure I answered the question.
No, you did. You did.
Okay, good.
And now we've got an insight into what it's
my parenting
like.
style, which is probably quite scary, yeah.
May I add to that really briefly, which is that I think the question's an interesting question, but regardless of what we think, the bottom line is, following the pandemic, school has not done whatever it was meant to be doing. Homes have not run the way that they were meant to be running. Everyone has been thrown out their comfort zones, and we have young people turning up who do not have any of the things that, even if we can bring it down to a really small amount that school's meant to do, they have not been able to do that. And I think that it is important for businesses to look at the young people coming in and think, well, you've just missed out your whole university experience and done it all online, so you probably have really even less people skills than we would have imagined pre-COVID. And that's with everybody coming in over this next generation.
So there needs to be, would you say, a little bit of empathy around that and understanding?
Yeah, I don't mean to sound like a really mean therapist, because I'm really empathetic when I'm a therapist. But when I work in businesses, I'm not empathetic. Like, I think it's really hard. And don't get me wrong, I work with a lot of vulnerable people. I specialise in trauma and worked with horrific situations during COVID. I don't lack empathy. However, I don't think that's work's problem. If I'm honest, I think work is work, mental health is mental health. If there's a mental health issue, you need to go to therapy. And I think at work, like I said, what we need to do is get stuff done on time and in budget. And the bottom line is, if they're turning up without these skills, the only question really is not why and do we feel bad for them, it's what are you doing to train them? How are you giving them these skills? Yeah. Because most workplaces aren't. They're moaning about it and complaining about it, but they're not being proactive in saying, well, actually, let's provide it, let's talk about it, let's name what's missing and then cater for that.
Yep.
And Lewis, we've heard a lot about resilience today and you having to experience going through hard times and experiencing bad things. Is there a way that employers or employees can build resilience without having to go through that? Or are there other ways to build resilience?
Probably not. I think it's been said already. You have to have experienced failure of some kind to know what that feels like. To know that everything isn't always perfect.
Oh, Kelly's joining the stage.
Have I?
It's no longer just Beyonce.
It's a duet now.
We're just the backup singers.
I don't even remember the third Destiny Child's name. That's how bad it is.
I do. It's Michelle. Okay, well.
Beyonce, Kelly, and Michelle.
Yeah,
I'm Beyonce. We've established that.
I think I'll just be Taylor Swift or something like that.
Kelly, it is.
What were we talking about? Oh, here we go. I've got another. You said resilience. You can't.
Going through hard stuff.
Yeah, that's my fault for being silly. How much do you use your early career experiences in this area to help shape your approach?
A fair bit, to be honest. So I joined my previous business on a graduate scheme, and I think there's a lot of expectation around graduates, and there's a lot of stigma around graduates, particularly from people in the business, who will often go, why are they getting special treatment, and why is it? And that's kind of part of what we've talked about earlier. Of there's been an approach of, well, these people are special, give them special treatment, and there probably is a bit of, some of the things that I felt I missed out on, or I probably did get special treatment as a graduate of, we've invested in these people, we're paying them probably a bit more than we should do, but that's because that's the market for that talent, right? And so we want to protect them, and if we've invested in them, we don't want them to leave, so let's do what they want. And I think I was, I probably had that in my previous business, and it was only then when I came off the graduate scheme that I then got challenged and was like, oh, this is work. Oh, I do actually need to, deliver things on time, and I can't get away with just, messing around with the other people who are on the graduate program. And I think there is always a point that you get to where you go, actually, you do need to learn what this is like. And most of the time, it's, it's not just going to be learned through education. It has to be learned through lived experience of that actually happening. But I think there probably is, or there does need to be, an understanding from managers, from employers, that that does need to happen, and it's not an immediate, this person's not very good. It's, to the points that were already made. What learning are we giving them? How are we developing them? How are we making sure that it's just a one-time thing and not a consistent thing that happens again and again?
Can I just add to that? I think we also need to speak about management competency as well. So we have many managers that, are very, very skilled at their discipline, but in terms of their people management skills, like even having difficult, regardless of the generation, trust me, even having difficult conversations, having clear objectives, creating meaningful connection for people coming to the office. So not coming to the office to join Teams calls, meaningful connection to make people feel that they're part of the bigger picture. These skills also need to be developed in managers. So sometimes we Gen Z get a bad, deal, but not wanting to come into the office and such and so on and so forth. But how are we upskilling managers to create the environment where, not that they want to come in, because they should come in, but where it's useful, beneficial, and really strategically aligned for them to come in, as opposed to just come in to join a Teams call. So management competency does come into it as well, I think.
Definitely. And we had a question which fits into that around what interventions would you recommend to enable the ageing workforce to be able to work well with the young and new workforce? I probably wouldn't have said ageing.
Seasoned is the term.
Do you know what? We're not going to see ageing as a bad thing today. That's not going to happen, so it doesn't matter. So what interventions would you recommend?
I think as I was speaking about upskilling line managers, that's definitely a thing. Where I worked previously to this place, we created a policy called Remote But Reachable. And it was mandated. So it was a fully remote fintech, but it was mandated that once a month, everybody had to come in, depending on your different department. You came in on different days, but it had to be meaningful connection. So there had to be like either a strategy meeting or some mentoring or whatever the case may be. And we only mandated it for once a month. But on the back of that, people saw the benefits of it and started coming in more often. So I think making sure that you have the conversation about meaningful connection. So presenteeism doesn't even make sense to me, probably as a geriatric millennial, but to a lot of people, they see comfort in seeing people in the office and thinking that someone's really, really, doing the work, but it's not necessarily the case. So meaningful connections, connecting it to strategy, meaningful collaboration, I think is something that you should probably focus on.
And does the current product menu for health and wellbeing benefits need a revamp to meet different needs? So, for example, alcohol or drug addiction, keeping fit, social media impact. Liz, I'd like to go to you for this one.
It's a tricky question, and I think that on the back of what I was just saying before, I think that for me, a lot of my training that I give bridges a lot of the gaps that Mel's talking about in terms of giving people clear boundaries of how to manage things that aren't really spoken about. We have a lot of fear going on around mental health, around all of the topics to do with diversity. How do we talk about it? How do we go about it? What do we say? And, the question is, do we need to change and update? I actually think that we've been raising awareness for a really long time, and I think organisations that don't yet have their policies in place, it probably says more about the organisation than about how up to date they are, because we've been doing that. I think now in a way it's almost a little bit, not for everyone, but of backtracking in a way that actually, like I said before, it's not work's job to fix people's problems and cure mental health issues. It is their job to be supportive. It is their job to be helpful. It is a privilege if you have a perk in place. Amazing privileges of somewhere that I was speaking the other week. They have access to things like autism assessments and ADHD assessments. Now, anyone been on an NHS waitlist will know what a privilege that is. Wonderful. But it's not your job necessarily to do that. These are privileges. What it is, our manager's job is to learn how to say, thank you for raising that. this is our way that we deal with it, and we're going to be passing it along to here or there. And we've got a lot of managers who are feeling disempowered, having conversations that are out of their depth and becoming borderline therapists for their teams. And I don't think it's appropriate, and I don't think it's helpful. And I think it can become quite manipulative and toxic for the functioning of the team as well. I think there's a healthy level of sharing. Of course, we're all humans. And then there's a point at which things need to go down a certain channel. Whatever that might be, those do need to be in place. And I think beyond that, we just need to be really well equipped of knowing how to ask certain questions or carry out certain risk assessments and pass it along to the people that deal with that.
And we're quickly running out of time, so I'm going to jump to each of our lovely panellists sat in front of you today and ask, what are the 2-3 headline areas that employers are or should be considering when looking to create the best employee experience for the Gen Z workforce? Who wants to go first?
I'll go first so that someone else doesn't take mine.
Yeah.
I mean, just headline communication, I think, is probably the biggest thing, and that's a two-way thing. So, you know, having a properly effective employee listening strategy and really understanding what people need. And again, the focus of the topic and the panel is around Gen Z, but you know, as we've said already, it's benefits everyone, right? So communication is super important. And then I suppose to steal from the talk this morning around recognition, I think there is a piece around doing it in the right way. So I know Liz said earlier around the kind of hormones that we're giving to people, and it not just being like, so that people you know, are getting addicted to it, but doing it in the right way, giving people purpose, giving people meaning, people feeling like they are part of something bigger than themselves. Because I think when people live online, you know, it's very easy to feel distance, very easy to feel alone. It might not look like it externally through social media, but you know, what's behind the screen or behind the phone. I think creating that space and building that culture of recognition, you know, kind of bridges that gap intergenerationally, because it works both ways and it's kind of across the whole business. So they're my two.
Thank you. Mel?
I think it definitely, maybe we need to bridge the gap between what the organisations need to be able to function and what this new generation or the future leaders are going to need to be able to be their best selves. Okay, so I'm not a fan of just, you know, 5 million table tennis tables and bean bags on the floor and all sorts of random cool things, because a lot of the times when you have these companies that have all these really, really cool jazzy things, there's nothing underneath. So it's about getting the fundamentals right. So it may be not very sexy and quite boring, but it leads to the clarity, it leads to the transparency, it leads to real total reward offerings that are attracting and retaining the key talent. And those things, so you can, different things, as I said before, could be relevant to completely different people. So it's not a one-size-fits-all. It's knowing your population and gearing your total reward strategy to be in line with the company strategy, but also in the right place to attract and retain your demographic of staff, whatever that is. So I probably didn't answer the question,
yeah, you did.
But I probably gave it in a different way.
And Liz, just very quickly before we run out of time.
So I would actually, on the back of that, flip the question around. There is what we need to do for our employees, but I think it starts at recruitment, of you working out actually what you're looking for. And I think that, again, to streamline the academic or intellectual technical skill set assessments and spend a much more time in investing in the values and the mindsets and the ability to collaborate and grow of the people coming in is going to give you that advantage. And I'd say from there, the most invaluable thing for me is education, is to skill up your leaders, skill up. The most meaningful work I do will be training partners and associates, directors and grads alongside each other to be able to work together and communicate. I don't need to tell them what to do because they tell each other in a respectful, listening way and get the most productive outcomes that way.
Wonderful. Well, a huge round of applause for our fantastic speakers.
Thank you.